Right. Quick question. How would you feel if you sold your house, packed up your kids, bought a one-way ticket to a brand new country with a royal palace, an opera house, and a thriving capital city, and arrived to find two rotting bamboo huts and a swamp that boils turtle eggs in 10 minutes? Ah, yes, the opera house. Lovely. Just slightly invisible. Because that, my friends, actually happened in 1823 to hundreds of Scottish people. They were promised a tropical paradise called Poyais, fertile soil, gold in the rivers, a Covent Garden-style theater. What they got was malaria, starvation, and a level of betrayal so spectacular it makes the fire festival look like a minor scheduling inconvenience. And the best part, the man who sold them this nightmare wasn't a master criminal. He was a failed soldier with a Napoleon complex and absolutely no shame whatsoever. So grab a cup of tea, and let's talk about Gregor MacGregor, the man who invented an entire country to sell it to his own people. So picture Britain in 1815. The Napoleonic Wars just ended. Wellington's basking in the glow of Waterloo. Here's the financial cocktail that made all this possible. The government had spent 2 decades fighting Napoleon, rocked up enormous debt, and was now desperate to stabilize things. The safest investment in the country, the British government bond, was paying out a measly 3% interest. Meanwhile, the Bank of England panicked about deflation and basically said, print more notes, who cares, flooding the country with cash.
So now you've got an entire new middle class sitting on stacks of money, earning embarrassingly little interest, and absolutely itching for something, anything with a bigger payout. And right on cue, in walks Latin America.
Spain's American empire was collapsing like a poorly built plan, thanks to revolutionaries like Simón Bolívar kicking the colonial powers out one country at a time. Suddenly, there's a whole buffet of brand new nations. Gran Colombia, Peru, Chile, all desperate for cash, all selling government bonds in London, all offering a juicy 6% return, double the boring old console. Think of it as the 1820s version of crypto. Exotic, unregulated, nobody really understands it, and everybody's friend's cousin apparently made a fortune. The problem, nobody in London had the faintest idea what these countries actually looked like. Information took months to cross the Atlantic by ship. So when a brand new nation called Gran Colombia pops up, and people barely know where that is either, why would anyone blink at one more unfamiliar name on the list? Peru, Chile, Gran Colombia. Sure, throw in a fourth one, why not? And there's one more ingredient: Scotland. After the Highland clearances in a brutal post-war slump, thousands of Scots were out of work and desperate for a fresh start. And lurking in the back of the national memory was the Darien scheme. That was a catastrophic 1690s attempt to build a Scottish colony in Panama that bankrupted half the country and killed thousands. For an entire generation, a successful colony wasn't just a financial opportunity, it was redemption. So, to recap the baseline: cheap money, info nobody can verify, a hunger for high returns, and a nation primed to believe in colonial glory. All you need now is somebody shameless enough to light the match. But then, enter Gregor MacGregor. Born Christmas Eve 1786 in Stirlingshire, MacGregor came from Clan Gregor, a clan so notorious the British government literally banned them from using their own surname until 1774. So MacGregor grows up with this enormous chip on his shoulder about respectability. And from a young age, he's obsessed not with doing impressive things, but with looking like he's done impressive things. He joins the army at 16 and, this is very on brand, doesn't earn his rank. He buys it using his wife's dowry. He becomes a captain purely through marriage money and a love of shiny uniforms. His military career ends not in glorious battle, but in a petty dispute over uniforms and rank, and he's forced to resign. Then his wife dies, the money dries up, and MacGregor, broke, embarrassed, and allergic to honest work, sails off to South America to become a mercenary for Believers' Revolution. And look, credit where it's due, he had some early wins. He even marries Bolivar's actual cousin. But his record gets steadily worse, capped off by an incident at Portobello, where facing Spanish troops, MacGregor, and I cannot stress enough that this is a real historical fact, jumped out of a window into the ocean and abandoned his own men to be slaughtered. I'm not running away, I'm advancing toward the sea.
Bolivar eventually has enough and orders him arrested for treason. So MacGregor, sensing that war hero is no longer on the table, flees to the Mosquito Coast, modern Honduras and Nicaragua, in 1820, completely broke and facing the horrifying prospect of going home to Britain as just a normal failure.
Now, here's the thing. Instead of slinking home quietly, MacGregor meets a local Mosquito chief, King George Frederick, plies him with rum and whiskey, and walks away with a signed deed for 8 million acres of uninhabitable jungle. The land grant was real, it just meant nothing whatsoever under British or international law. Most people would try to sell some land. MacGregor looked at his worthless jungle deed and thought bigger. Why sell land when you could sell an entire country? He returns to London and declares himself His Serene Highness Gregor I, Sovereign Prince of the State of Poyais. A failed mercenary just self-promoted to royalty and nobody stopped him. Honestly, the confidence alone should be studied at business schools. So here's where it gets genuinely impressive. MacGregor didn't just print some flyers and hope for the best. He built an entire bureaucratic fantasy, brick by brick, because he understood something very modern. If a lie comes with enough paperwork, nobody questions it. It's not a scam, it has a parliament. He invented a 3-chamber government. He designed a national flag, very fetching. He sketched military uniforms for the Poyaisian Lancers, and then the masterstroke. A 355-page leather-bound guidebook, supposedly written by a Captain Thomas Strangeways, who, shockingly, did not exist. The book describes Poyais as a tropical Eden, disease-free air, soils so rich you get 3 harvests of maize a year. Rivers literally containing, and I quote, globules of pure gold. Globules. Not nuggets, globules. Very specific word choice for a country that doesn't exist. He opens actual offices, a Poyaisian legation in London and Edinburgh, and starts selling land at a few shillings an acre. Then he goes after serious money. A respected London bank, Sir John Paring Shaw Barber & Co., agrees to underwrite a £200,000 sovereign bond for the government of Poyais at 6% interest. Sir, can we just confirm this country exists before we lend it £200,000? Don't be tedious. He commissions a top engraver, the same man who prints real Bank of Scotland notes, to produce 70,000 Bank of Poyais dollar bills, beautifully printed, completely worthless. But to a working-class investor in 1822, official-looking currency was about as convincing as proof gets. Then he starts recruiting settlers, mostly Scots, doctors, bankers, laborers, all sold on the dream of redeeming the Darien disaster with a triumphant new colony. 2 ships fill up, the Honduras Packet, leaving London in September 1822 with 70 emigrants, and the Kennersley Castle, leaving Scotland in January 1823 with nearly 200 more. And right before the first ship sails, MacGregor pulls off what might be the single coldest move in the entire saga. He shows up at the docks personally, charming, regal, reassuring, and tells the settlers that British pounds will be useless in Poyais. Hand them over, he says. Take Bank of Poyais dollars instead. It's the only legal currency there. Don't worry, it's perfectly legal tender, in a country that does not exist. So he strips them of their actual money moments before sending them off to their doom, with a smile and a wave. It's basically a 19th century rug pull, except the rug is an entire fake nation. These settlers genuinely believed wild, specific things. One Edinburgh cobbler emigrated because he'd been appointed the official shoemaker to the Princess of Poyais. Another passenger, Andrew Picken, had papers naming him manager of the Poyais National Theater and spent the whole voyage describing the opera house he was about to run. Wide boulevards, marble columns, the works. I've got the playbill picked out already. In November 1822, the Honduras Pocket drops anchor off the Mosquito Coast. No city, no palace, no opera house. Just an empty malarial swamp and 2 ruined bamboo huts previously inhabited by hermits. So where's the rest of the theater? The soil wasn't fertile. It was barren sand. Soils so brutally hot that one settler, James Hastie, described it cooking a turtle egg in 10 minutes flat, like nature's own air fryer. He planted what seeds he had to try to feed his family. They sprouted, then scorched and crumbled to powder in his hands.
When the Kennersley Castle arrived months later, its passengers found the survivors of the first group living in tents on the beach, starving, sick, and burying their dead. This is the part of the episode where the laughing kind of stops. Disease tore through the camp. Malaria, yellow fever, starvation.
People died in a swamp because a man wanted to feel like a king. And in maybe the most absurd footnote in this entire fiasco, MacGregor appointed one investor, Major William Richardson, to his made-up Order of the Green Cross. And Richardson actually went to the British royal court and presented forged credentials to King George IV.
Representing Poyais, Your Majesty. Lovely, never heard of it. Carry on. The Crown accepted it, without question. Honestly, the suppression of fun is one thing the British Empire reliably excelled at, but apparently fact-checking imaginary nations wasn't high on the list.
By May 1823, the colony was a death camp. A passing schooner finally found the survivors and alerted the authorities in nearby British Honduras, who launched an emergency evacuation. Of the roughly 250 people who sailed for Poyais, more than 180 died. Fewer than 50 ever made it home. And here's the gut punch. When the broken survivors got back to London, some of them defended MacGregor in the press, insisted he'd been a visionary, betrayed by bad subordinates. Imagine surviving a swamp death camp and still doing PR for the guy who put you there. The financial damage was just as brutal. Poyaisian bonds collapsed to zero, and the panic helped trigger the wider Latin American debt crash of 1825, which took down half a dozen major London banks, including the one that underwrote MacGregor's bonds in the first place. Karma had decent aim, just terrible timing, since it hit everyone except MacGregor. Sensing arrest, MacGregor fled to Paris, and I want you to sit with the audacity of this, tried to run the exact same scam on the French. New constitution, upgraded from principality to republic. Same pitch. French bureaucracy, however, turned out to be unexpectedly competent. They flagged a wave of passport applications to a non-existent country and arrested him in 1825. Honestly, the one-time French paperwork comes through for someone. At trial, MacGregor argued he was simply a real estate developer let down by poor management and bad weather, not a fraudster. And because 19th century law required proving direct criminal intent, he was acquitted. He went home and tried to sell more Poyais bonds, twice. The market finally had wised up. And then the ending that breaks every rule of narrative justice. MacGregor moved to Caracas. He applied for a military pension as a Bolivar-era veteran, and Venezuela, apparently choosing not to remember the desertion, the cowardice, or the international fraud, reinstated his rank, paid him back wages, and gave him a state pension. When he died in 1845, at 58, peacefully, in his own bed, he was buried with full military honors in Caracas Cathedral. The president of Venezuela personally walked behind his coffin. To Gregor MacGregor, friend, soldier, sovereign prince, and the reason your grandfather lost his life savings. No prison, no real reckoning, just a royal funeral for the man who invented a country, sold it to his own countrymen,
and let over 180 of them die for it. Today, historians consider MacGregor essentially the founding father of modern securities fraud.
He's the blueprint later echoed by every dodgy crypto coin and influencer scam that promises paradise and delivers a beach with no infrastructure. Turns out, if you wrap a lie in enough official-looking paperwork, people will believe almost anything.